Ryan, thank you so much for joining us today. We are here to talk about young professionals, the private equity space, and to help kind of young professionals in the space understand the whole ecosystem of private equity. And on your side, today we're talking about business development. I would love to hear a little story about your background and how you got to where you are.
For sure. Well, thanks so much for having me, Jennifer. Excited to talk about my favorite topic of business development. Yeah, happy to touch on my background. So I'm actually originally from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, grew up there, then came down to Texas to go to UT Austin. Met my wife while in school. She's from Frisco, so you can probably connect the dots and how I ended up in Dallas. I've worked for a few different private equity funds in town. Started off in finance at L-Star Capital, which is the credit arm of Lone Star Funds. So it's really just like the junior analyst on the team, as you can imagine, doing any ad hoc projects or whatever needed to be done. Working pretty long hours, was there for about 2.5 years, and then kind of had that classic decision point when you're a junior, analyst on a team. It's like, do I want to continue the current lifestyle I'm doing, or maybe transition and find something that might be a better fit for what I'm looking to do over the next, 20, 30, 40 years of my career. I guess hopefully not 40, but 20 or 30 years. So I thought about, what I wanted to do, felt like a front-facing role would be better fit for my personality and what I like to do. I like meeting new people, making relationships, but still really like to be involved in the deal and learning about companies and meeting with founder family-owned businesses. I always find it really interesting to hear the story of the founder, like how they started the business, where the idea came from, and how they've, transitioned to becoming, so successful in growing the business. So I wanted to maintain that portion of my role and job, but just really wanted to be more front-facing, meeting with owners, convincing them to partner with us. And so that's where I ended up starting to find that business development role. At the time, it wasn't very popular. There's probably only a handful of seats in Dallas. So I really just started emailing every private equity firm in Dallas and trying to figure out, like, is business development something they want to grow in? Do they currently have a function? How do I get into this function? I really didn't know much about, the day to day other than big picture, you're finding deals for the team to invest in. So I ended up landing a job at Gage Capital, working for Andrew Pikes, who's been in his role for for a decade or two. He just has so much good experience. I wanted to learn, like, what are the good things and bad things, like what's the right way to run a successful business development shop. Gage had clearly shown that they could do that, so I wanted to learn, like, what the secret sauce was essentially. I was the fourth member of the BD team. Once again, kind of the most junior member, which I wanted to be. I thought, learning from two other associates and Andrew at the time would just be, very beneficial. Sometimes when you're like that associate or analyst, going up to like the partner or like the head guy to ask, what you might think is a dumb question is sometimes a little intimidating. So it was nice to have two like almost peers in the room as well to bounce, any question or ideas I had off them. So that was really my start in business development. Like you said, bounced around a few different shops since then. I was at Princeton Equity Group, similar to Gage in the sense that they're another private equity firm in town, but the sourcing strategy was very different, and we can get into that. I'm not sure if that's something you want me to touch on now, but like at Gage, we were really covering the long tail, any intermediaries from like the Houlihan Lokis all the way to Jim and Bob in Kansas City, and even some brokers as well. So really understood, like, how do you allocate your time properly? Like, where does it make sense? Because if you just email as many investment bankers and brokers as possible, sure, you're gonna have a lot of calls, but like, what are you actually gonna get from those calls? So it's like finding the guys and gals who, are playing in a similar sandbox from both like an ownership dynamic, industry perspective, and size of deals. So that's what I was really like learning at Gage, and how to create those relationships and a cadence to stay top of mind. Princeton, we did something very similar, but then we also focused on proprietary outreach. What I always say is you want to marry your sourcing with your investment strategy, and if those two things aren't married, it can be very difficult for both sides of the house. So at Princeton, we were focused on franchisor opportunities, which is obviously a lot smaller of a target addressable market than like if you do business services or something like that, right? So we ended up doing a lot of proprietary outreach, both cold calls, cold emails to CEOs and owners of companies, and then also attending like a lot of trade shows and industry events to start creating the relationships with the owners and CEOs of companies, but then also just like executives in the space who are very well connected, right? It's not always, going direct to the owner. Like maybe you find an accountant, an attorney, a private wealth guy, or something like that who, focuses on that industry specifically. And they have a lot of good contacts, maybe have known CEOs in that space for, 20, 30 years. Like those are also incredibly helpful meetings, right? It's not as obvious because it's not like an investment banker who shows you a deal sheet and you can point to like, yeah, I had that call, I got that deal. But it's more of a long-term relationship where, eventually that person is going to introduce you to someone who wants to sell, right? And it's all about staying top of mind from that perspective. And then finally, what leads me here today, made the switch over from Princeton about a year and a half ago. So I'm at Sky Island now, Director of Business Development. So I lead our intermediary coverage over here. I'd say our models is more similar to like a Gauge where we're covering kind of like the long tail all the way to the big investment banks. Our focus is all in manufacturing. So it could be anything from industrial products, food and beverage, packaging, metals. So it's very wide from an industry perspective, but very narrow from a type of business because they're all manufacturers. So just thinking about that strategy, I was like, what's the best way to go map and attack this? And to me, it's really trying to expand the universe of intermediaries that we're speaking to on a daily basis. And then looking at
How many intermediaries? Do you feel like you know everyone in the space, or do you feel like you're still
I
meeting
don't
new
think,
people?
yeah, I wish I could say I knew everyone in the space. I don't think so. I think that'd be foolish to think that. I mean, there's always, you go to a conference, one investment bank or broker splinters off of another. You're like, how haven't I heard of that firm before? And then you can kind of connect the dots. So I think I'm always making new relationships, whether it's, like I said earlier, it's finding someone else in the space and maybe they're like, hey, Ryan, you spend a lot of time in manufacturing. Have you spoke to so and so? And sometimes it's like it seems so obvious, but I just never thought about once again like kind of like that indirect way of finding people who are around M&A, but not necessarily just sell side investment bankers, if you will.
Awesome. So, it's a very competitive space, as you know. Companies are popping up every day, new firms. And so tell me a lot about Sky Island. I know you said manufacturing, but let's dive into that a little bit deeper. And then, what's your competitive advantage? How do you sell Sky Island?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and I appreciate you asking it because obviously would love to talk about Sky Island. So we were founded in late 2018, early 2019 by Jack Waterstreet and Will Dobbs. They were previously at Insight Equity. So I guess we're another one of the Insight spinoffs, if you will, here in Dallas. We just raised a $300 million fund last November. So we're excited to start. We're not excited to start. We've already made three platform investments, but excited to continue to find good investment opportunities to put that capital to work. We're focusing on businesses 4 to 20 of EBITDA, mostly founder family-owned businesses, but then we'll also look at corporate carve-outs, which makes it really interesting. Majority equity investors, like I said earlier, from an industry standpoint, we go very wide, but it's all about manufacturing, and that's really from the partners' past experience and where they've been successful and where they believe they can drive value. A lot of times we're going in, partnering with the founder family, having them roll equity into the new holdco. That way, incentives are in line on both sides. And we're coming in with kind of a typical 90-day value creation agenda, excuse me. And just given the past experience we have in manufacturing, I think that really makes us, differentiated in the space. I think you see a lot of private equity firms today investing in services companies, whether it's like a blue collar roll up, white collar roll up, which I think is really interesting, and there's great value to be created there. But I think we're zagging a little bit when everyone else is zigging, if you will, just given that we're only focused on manufacturing. And that's, I think, where we're truly differentiated from a lot of other firms.
Okay, I love it. So I've been in business development for over 18 years. So I've seen a lot of different strategies on how people go to market and how people do business development. A lot of it can be relational, or some people are very technical and transactional. I feel like a combination is the best way. So, like at Alliant, I'm selling myself as our expertise technically. You want to make sure you have someone that understands your industry and sub-industry, which I believe over the years has become even more important. And then it's like that relational part. You want to do business with people you like and you trust. So, how do you go to market? Have you seen people do, these different types of marketing? And tell me what you feel about that.
Yeah, that's a great question. I would completely agree with what you said. There's guys and gals who are very much relationship oriented or very transactional. Just send me the deal and let's move on to the next thing. If we're interested, we'll schedule a call, but not looking to really go beyond that. I think you have to marry the two together, like you said. I think you're spot on. The relationship side is incredibly important because as a BD professional, your focus isn't just sourcing wide marketed deals, right? You don't want to only be included in those large 300 plus private equity processes. And the way you think about, getting into a more like niche, narrow, more bespoke process is by having those relationships. Like when I'm thinking about an investment banker and how they think about Sky Island or even a broker, whoever it is, whoever's working on the deal, I want when they think of manufacturing that they think of Sky Island. And that's back to like the expertise and kind of how we're going to market. That way, when they have that next manufacturing engagement, or maybe they meet with an owner and the owner's like, hey, we don't want to run a process, but like, can you introduce us to a couple firms? Like, I want to make sure that we're top 3 or 5 on that list of manufacturing private equity firms that they think of. Now, on the other side, it has to be slightly transactional because, like, I think you and I chatted about before, like, you can't source 10 deals and close 5, right? At the end of the day, it's incredibly competitive. There's so many private equity firms, independent sponsors, other, strategics in the space that are trying to find some of these deals. So you have to, at the end of the day, at least in my perspective, take the data out there and use that data to like allocate your resources accordingly. And what I mean by that is, sure, there's certain guys who, investment bankers that I have known since my Gage days who we get along really well on a personal level. And like I love grabbing lunch, grabbing drinks, grabbing coffee with those guys and gals. But at the same time, like maybe they're healthcare focused, not as much on the manufacturing side. So it like just doesn't make sense. Like from a relationship perspective, would love to continue talking to them, but it doesn't make sense to get on the phone with them 10 times a year, right? Maybe like once a year to see what's going on. And you never know who can make a connection or who sees a manufacturing deal, right? But at the same time, you need to take the market and then take the data and figure out like where you should be spending your time. Like if someone's doing a lot of deals in manufacturing, founder family on our size range, that's probably someone I should spend, at least 30 minutes to an hour every quarter, getting to know and hearing what they're doing. So I think it's really a combination of both.
Awesome. I just came up with a new tagline for you, manufacturing sky's the limit.
Wow, I like that. Very
Yeah,
creative.
I love it. So you were talking about how many times you're introduced to companies through service providers or people outside
Mhm.
of like the investment banking arena. Um, for myself, I do a lot of events to help bring people together and connect either, whether it be a deal connect for deal sourcing or bringing people together. I have an event in Vail and finding ways for people to really get to know each other and build those relationships. So as a service provider, or even, for these young professionals moving up and they're building their relationships, what have you found has been the most successful and helpful? I know you're spending a lot of time at like ACG events or deal sourcing events. Um, where do you think you should be spending your time, and what has been helpful that you were like maybe surprised?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Um, So I would say, given we're, relatively new, we're not investing out of our 10th fund, still trying to make sure that intermediaries, know who Sky Island is and, trying to grow that network. So I'd say to start, I've been doing a lot of intermediary focused conferences, whether it's like ACGs or something similar to that, just because it's very efficient, right? You can go to a market, have 20 meetings in one day, and then, stay another day and find other meetings in the city. So to start, it's like, let's make sure we have our bases covered and we can be as efficient as possible. So I've been focused on the ACGs from that perspective. Um, but I think a lot of people are focused on that. So it's like, okay, how do you differentiate yourself from there? So for me, it's like, we're finding trade shows now where we can meet with industry executives, industry specific service providers who then, once again, can give us those introductions. And I have a couple of service providers in town who I'm, getting lunch with on a quarterly basis, in addition to those, trade show type events. And I'm always surprised just how willing people are to give introductions. And it's been incredibly fruitful to be candid with you. And it really all starts with just like wanting to be with that person over lunch, right? Like, he or she's a very good person, a good guy. We have common interests. I enjoy talking to them, enjoy getting lunch with them. So I've had a couple recently where I've just been absolutely shocked just with how generous people can be just, start building that relationship. You become friends with the person, and they're very willing to give introductions, whether it's to a business owner or to someone else who has really good connections in the space. So I would say like don't turn down the meeting. You just never know. Like if you like the person, they're in a similar space to you, a 30-minute coffee is not a waste of time, right? You never have any idea like who's going to give you that next introduction or who might have a friend that owns a business in the space or something similar to that. So I would say, yeah, there's been a lot of times in my career where I've gone to a meeting and been like, this is really going to suck. Like, I think this is probably going to burn like 30 minutes to an hour. And then you show up and the person's wonderful and very well connected. And you're like, wow, I can't believe I thought that going into it.
I love it. Yeah. So being open-minded, and if you
Definitely.
go to like 5 coffees with them and there's nothing there, that's different.
Yes, of course,
Yes.
100%. But like taking that first intro coffee is I'd say rarely like a bad use of time, right? Because I mean, you can have a call with a broker, a banker, a business owner for 30 minutes, and it can go nowhere as well, right? So it's not like every call you're 100% gonna, have something coming out of that.
Right. I love it. So that's probably what you felt like whenever you came to the coffee with me at first, but
Definitely not.
that's
Definitely
okay.
not.
But I do think putting good out there is so important. I love helping people find jobs. That's one thing I just love doing. And I never know if it's going to, come back, but I think it comes back in some way. It doesn't have to come back directly from that person. But giving back is super important, I think. So, in your busy life and all these meetings, how do you keep up with your contacts and your deals?
Yeah, that's like $1 million question right there. I would say I'm very pragmatic when it comes to like sequence of like contacts with each one of my bankers or intermediaries or, service providing relationships. And what I mean by that is, I have in our CRM, we use Deal Cloud. I think a lot of people do, or whether it's Salesforce, doesn't matter. So I think you coming up with like your list of contacts, right? Like who should I be talking to on a yearly basis? And then, like I said, using that data to drive how often should I be contacting them? So like in our CRM, I have all of our intermediaries tiered, right? So like tier ones, I'd say most likely that we will find a deal all the way down to tier fours. And then within each bank, I have each contact like tiered as well by like contact frequency. Meaning like if someone's a 365, I talk to them once a year. If someone's a 90, I talk to them 4 times a year. So I think applying that to each contact and then just staying on top of it, right? So I'm running a report on a weekly basis, like who do I need to talk to? Who haven't I caught up with recently? And then just continually checking yourself and making sure you're staying on top of things. And then I'm doing that alongside the deals as well, right? So as you can imagine, I think most BD professionals have some sort of like lead sheet in Excel, right? It's like, what's the most interesting thing top of mind that I've heard of that I want to make sure that we see? And then just marrying those up with the calls, right? So if someone and I, spoke about a really interesting deal 3 months ago, it's probably time for me to get back on the phone with that person and then on the phone making sure that I'm following up. And it all comes back to like making sure you're taking notes right on these calls and actually logging them in your CRM. I know no one wants to do it and it sucks and it's a time suck, but like at the same time, you need to make sure that you're on top of it and can reference back to a previous call and be like, what did I talk to with this person? Oh yeah, they had that really interesting deal. I want to make sure I follow up on that to make sure that we like kind of reiterate our interest in it.
So, how important do you think LinkedIn is? You're saying your CRM, an
Hmm.
Excel spreadsheet, and I always tell everyone Excel spreadsheets are my golden, like I love them more than accountants. Like I over the years I've gone to different firms and like I need to know who my people are and where they live. And so I have like a master private equity list. And I can just like filter if I'm going to Boston, who do I need to meet whenever I'm there? And it's more refined now because I'm like I don't need to know everybody. I just need to
Sure.
know the right people and be much more targeted as you are. So how important do you think LinkedIn is? Because I do feel like that's a really good way to keep up with people too. Like every year I'll send out maybe a Christmas online Christmas card or a message and I'll get all these kickbacks and I go through LinkedIn to see where they've moved to. So, that's kind of my process of staying up, keeping my spreadsheet up. But I don't put everything into CRM. It's a little bit different than
Mhm.
like a private equity firm because I don't want all my, counterparts knowing all my business.
I mean, that makes sense. Like you said, probably very different, but I totally get your point there. I would say LinkedIn's very important, and it has a bunch of different use cases. And what I mean by that is, maybe it's a investment bank or a broker that I hear that's doing deals in our space, and I'm like, man, I don't know anyone at that firm. And I go to the website, and it's maybe they don't have their team on the website or something like that. But be able to just go into LinkedIn and see like who could I potentially email to get my like to open the door within the firm and create that relationship. And then it's also finding someone with maybe you have a connection. Like for me, maybe they went to UT, right? Or maybe I have a mutual connection with a good buddy or something like that. So being able to leverage like who can give me the introduction to open that door, right? Because not every investment bank or broker will respond the first time if you just cold email them. Like you're not going to get 100% response rate. So finding like other ways to get in the door makes a lot of sense. And I think LinkedIn is probably one of the easiest and most easily accessible, if you will, like tool to use from that perspective, right? Because you can easily go on and see like, okay, who do I know, or who do I know that knows someone at this other firm?
I love it. I agree. It's so nice to see connectivity. So many times I'm like completely surprised. I'm like, how in the
Exactly.
heck do you know that person?
Exactly.
Um, so throughout the years, you've learned certain things that have refined you as a business development professional. So maybe just share a couple things that you've learned along the way. Like at the beginning, did you just think, oh, relational at your first, company, and then you learned from Pikes? Like, what did you learn from him, and how have you kind of morphed into who you are today? And I think we are, for me, I'm constantly trying to improve myself as a professional, how I go to market as a person, my personal sell, and then just in general. So, kind of how have you morphed and what are some things you've learned? It could be, I mean, you've already shared a lot of those things with me, but maybe just mention a
Yeah,
few. Mhm.
for sure. I would say like just starting off, one of the first things when you ask that question that comes to mind is just like persistency is key. Like I think when you're starting off in a business development role, I don't think it doesn't matter if it's private equity, insurance, wealth advisory, whatever it is, software sales. I think like it's gonna be kind of frustrating to start. Like you realize that you're gonna have to kiss a lot of frogs. Like at your first phone call or your first 10, 100,000, like not necessarily gonna equate to a closed platform. And also like the type of work you're doing at a junior level is tough, right? Like you're doing a lot of operational type work, whether that's logging deals in the CRM, making sure you're not missing IY deadlines, pulling banker lists, trying to figure out like where there's gaps in your coverage. Like a lot of that isn't the most like sexy, rewarding work to start, but understanding that like you're building the blocks that help run the firm, right? Like if there's not deal flow, it's hard for a private equity firm to invest in companies, right? It's kind of like the lifeblood of the firm. That's what we'd always say, back at Gage. And then the persistency continues though, right? When you actually are starting to cover people, it's making sure that you're staying on top of them, making sure that you're staying on top of those leads that we were discussing earlier, right? Like going through your lead list and following up is not the most fun activity, but at the same time, like it's going to make those calls so much more beneficial because your return rate's just going to be so much higher, right? Like you can't expect every investment banker broker just because you told them you're interested in a deal 6 months ago to remember that and include you on the list, right? Like part of the job is that you're staying on top of them and reminding how interested you are in the deal. So I'd say like in general, like persistency is key. And I think Gage has shown that just with the amount of success that they've had and the funds that they've been able to raise, just with how much capital they've been able to deploy. So that would be like one of the first things that would come to mind, and I definitely learned that from Pikes.
I love it. So, how many deals, and I think I already asked you this, but I don't think we discussed it, is how many deals do you see a year or a week to help you bring in one deal or,
Yeah, that's a good question. So I can give you last year we saw over 1,000 deals and we did two platforms. Two
wow.
platforms and a handful of add-ons. So right there, the percentage isn't great. So it just shows like I said earlier, you're gonna have to kiss a lot of frogs.
Right.
You can't take it personal when we pass on a deal, right? Like you have to understand that's part of the process. We want to see those so to see those deals because like I think you and I chatted about this when we got lunch, sometimes the deal isn't what it looks like at face value. And what I mean by that is like if you're looking at a broker deal, like sometimes the deal will be labeled as like construction services or something, right? And then you get in the teaser, you get the sim, and you're like, wait, this is actually more of like a building products deal, or maybe a manufacturer of some sort of industrial product that involves construction. So like that's why like we're looking at the 1,000 deals, right? It's not that we don't know what we're interested in. It's more just the fact that you actually want to make sure you're going through the steps to evaluate the deal so that we're not missing something. Because a lot of times that's where the value is like created, right? Like if it's mismarketed, right, like the description's just off or something like that, a lot of private equity firms won't like double click to take that extra, hour or two to learn more about the business. They'll just based on face value. And I think that's where the value is created, right? Because all of a sudden, maybe it could have been a 200 firm process and half of them passed just based on that or something more like that. So then maybe you aren't paying as high of a market clearing multiple, within the process.
I love that. Just continue to dig deep and see. And a lot of people
Mhm.
are just going to pass on it and could be something really great.
Exactly.
So very good. The last thing is let's talk about mentorship because a
Mhm.
lot of young professionals, they're moving up. How important and have you had good, great mentors? I know I have. I wouldn't
Definitely.
be where I am today. And how do young professionals even find that?
That's a really good question. I think it's incredibly important, especially in a position like business development. I think sometimes it's a little lonely, right? Like you're kind of on your own island,
Mhm.
and you're seeing, either success or failures, and you're like, is everyone seeing this, or am I doing something wrong? Like, is my process off? Like, are we just not getting deals, or is the market slow? So I think it's important to have peers and also mentors as well, right? So I'd say my mentors in my life, definitely my parents. My older brother, so I have a brother who works at a hedge fund in New York. He kind of got me into private equity originally, if you will. Like I was a finance major at UT, didn't necessarily know what I wanted to do next, and he, kind of helped explain the situation and steer me in the right direction, if you will. So I'm always bouncing ideas off him. I mentioned Andrew Pikes earlier. Like I said, he's been a fantastic mentor to me, both on like understanding what a successful business development practice looks like, but then also like how are you advancing in your career? What should you be thinking about? Like what's important as you get promoted to that next level? Like what do you want to make sure your responsibilities are? Whether that's like you want to be involved in selecting what investment bankers are going to come pitch on one of your deals, or you want to be going to management meetings, whatever it is, like make sure you're marrying like what you want to do with where your career is progressing. And then I would say, other individuals I've worked with in the past, it's maybe not as much as a mentor, but more of a peer. And if that's just more of like, connecting on a weekly or bi-weekly basis and just hearing what struggles they're dealing with kind of in the market. Does that match what you're seeing in the market? Or like, hey, like, did you talk to so and so? Like, oh, that's like I connected with an investment banker for the first time, and turns out they're really focused on the manufacturing space. Maybe you should spend time with that individual. So I think just the more connections you have, especially close like that, the more you're going to hear about, one-off deals and get connected to other people who make a lot of sense and could drive a lot of value for you.
Love it. Awesome. I did think of one more question. So I know y'all are really growing and you've
Mhm.
been looking for a business development professional. What do you look for whenever you're hiring someone to partner with you? Because it has to be a
Yeah,
good fit for you and just the company in general. So what do you look for?
for sure. So I mean, the start like business development experience always helps, right? If you have someone who's already sourcing today, they're great plug and play. That makes life easy, right? Less training. But at the same time, I'm honestly more focused on finding like the right athlete. And what I mean by that is like finding someone who I can mold into like a successful business development professional. So what does that look like? I already talked about persistency. So like that's number one or number two on my list, right? If the person doesn't want it, they're not going to be willing to put in the work. That's gonna be really tough, especially the first couple of years, because I think everyone in some sort of business development role would agree creating those relationships is probably one of the hardest parts. Like once you have everything up and moving, you already know certain individuals. It's a lot easier to pick up the phone and call that. But when it's a more of a cold call or more of a cold outreach to try to create that relationship, that tends to be a little bit more difficult. So you want that persistency to start. I think financial acumen is really important as well, just because I want this individual to be able to gain credibility and create that credibility with investment bankers. So like if a senior investment banker asks him or her on a call about a specific deal in our portfolio, I really want to make sure that that person has a really good understanding and can intellectually answer the question. Or else, that banker is going to kind of look at the person and be like, yeah, that person's more of just like smiling and dialing, right? Not as much thinking of as like an investor, which I think is really important to grow on the
Mhm.
business development side. And then the last, but definitely not least, I would say, you want someone with like a business development mindset and personality. And what I mean by that is like someone who's engaging, someone who's easy to talk to, someone who people like to spend time with, right? It's kind of like the airport test that people always say, right? Like if you were in a layover, who would you like to grab a drink with? Very similar to that, right? I don't want someone who doesn't like meeting new people, right? Like that would be very tough for a business development function. But someone energetic, bring energy to the office every day, personable, and shows those characteristics that they want to meet new people, want to build those relationships and maintain them. I think that's incredibly important as well because if you don't like being in a social setting and you're going to all these events and conferences, meeting new people, that's probably not going to be the role for you.
Yes, totally agree. How many days are you on the road every year?
That's a good question. I would say I'm traveling 2 weeks a month, probably for two or
Okay,
three
that's
days
what
of
I
a
used
given
to do
week.
too.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So it's not
because you
too
have to
crazy.
have time to like follow up, to your
Yes, exactly.
point of persistence and following up.
Mhm.
You have to have time. Otherwise, it's like you're just going out meeting people
Exactly. Yes. 100% agree with that.
and getting ready for the week of meetings too. You have to
Exactly. Yeah.
be
There's a lot of
ready.
prep. Yep. Well, a lot of prep goes into a lot of follow-up as well. So
Yeah.
you can't just be purely on the road.
Well, I hope you're getting your sleep and some exercise to
I was gonna say
help
the
you.
exercise is the real issue. That's for sure.
Yes. Oh, yeah. When you're eating and drinking and traveling, it's hard. Definitely a
Definitely.
challenge. So, thank you so much. All the things that you said today are super valuable, not only to me, but all these young professionals. And I wrote some things down as we were talking that I thought were really important and are great takeaways. And I would say intentionality, being targeted, persistency and following up, connectivity, asking for the intro, allocating your time and energy, making relationships, and of course, my tagline for you now, manufacturing sky's the limit.